many, many years in and out trying to just keep an eye out when something came up that would explain this to me. The first part of the definition came up that started opening the light, and it was simply set aside. Well, at least there's a start. Sanctified has something to do with me or whatever believer set aside. So, starting from there. I'll tell you what, we're simply hitting the surface on it today as we look at this word, sanctification. It's something we don't see much in modern Christianity. It's not one of those buzzwords. It's not a popular word. Sanctification. And if I were to turn you towards a text, ironically, this text doesn't even have the word in there, but it's one of the greatest working definitions. And in Hebrews 12, read verse 1, inspirational, as this is being said in his letter to the Hebrews, I believe Paul writing this, it says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight." Here is where it starts getting real practical. Here's what you're called to do. Let aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and had sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So this all has to do with laying aside these weights of sin and running this race. Very physical, mental picture it sets here. And I thought in explaining or us exploring sanctification, let's have a little fun with it this morning. And let's turn it into a physical illustration. What is this thing called sanctification? Well, let's start with this in this physical illustration. And by the way, you're all going to play a part in this. You're all part of the illustration. You're not just observing, you're going to be part of it. That'll come into play in a minute. But let's start with this basic definition or working idea. Sanctification would be if the cross represents God. Everything to do with God is Christ. Of course, we think of that's why we have the cross. Well, sanctification would be you or I getting as close as we can to this cross. As close as, you get close enough, man, you can smell the wood. If this was newly oiled, you'd smell the stain from it. We might not get so close that we're actually touching it in this life. That may not be until we see Christ face to face. But people throughout history have gotten very, very close. Well, what's the advantage of getting so close? Well, see, the closer we get to this, the more we're influenced by God. The more peace there is, the more clarity there is in the things you have to face, the more power there is to face those things, the more understanding there is. I can make out all the little details that you in the back row can't see. I can see them because I'm this close. And all those positive things happen as you get closer and closer and closer. Well, in essence, that is sanctification. Now, let's build the illustration a little bit here. I'm going to get away from that speaker and not give you a heart attack back there, right? Let's build on this a little bit. If that's sanctification, salvation is simply being in some kind of friendship here with the cross. And so just being in this room would represent salvation. Just being in the same room. Well, see, here's the thing. So I'm going to use the whole room now as part of my illustration. And you see, at one time in my life, and one time in your life, you weren't in this room. You were out here, like me. You were on the outside looking in. Yeah, I bet you've never had an absent pastor preaching before. But here we are. I'm on the outside. As a matter of fact, if I move away from this window, I can't even see the cross. Now, there came a time this door was open. And I didn't open the door. It was locked to me. It was God himself who opened the door. And then at this point, I had a choice. Right? I could walk into this room or stay out there. Well, salvation would be the time I walked into this room. So here I am. I'm in a safe state. I am in the same room as the cross. And I can see it, but boy, it's a long way off. I can't make out too many details on that cross. And there's another thing. This is where all you guys come in. Because you guys are all my obstacles. So you can go home and tell people, what did the pastor tell you in this sermon? He said we're his obstacles. But you are for this illustration. So you're all the things. And look at how many of you there are between me and that cross. And sanctification is now this walk that I want to get closer to that cross. I just took a step. I am one step closer to that cross. And one step closer. But see, I get here. This is where they come in. And first there's the obvious sins. Chad, you're going to be one of my obvious sins, okay? Chad's obvious sin. So here's Chad. And let's just say, before I was saved, I worked with truckers like Jim. And I had a potty mouth. So, not saying you do, Jim. But here's the thing, is that it was obvious if I was going to be in friendship with Christ, that's one of the things I just knew right away it had to go. But here's the thing, now, Chad's a pretty strong guy, so he's going to be a great representation. Chad, would you grab my arm? See, I can't go anywhere because Chad's, the sin has got me here. We're going to call you sin for now. And potty mouth here has got me, and I'm just not doing it. And it's logical, I will not get closer until this gets broken. But boy, things can really get a hold of you, can't they? So here I say, potty mouth be gone. And so I'm released. I can actually keep walking now. And I get closer and closer. But all things aren't so obvious. Some things are good-looking sins. There's B. She's one of my good-looking sins. And let's say, B, your name is overtime. And you see, it's dangerous because overtime is not a bad thing. Everybody that's industrious, you want to work. But overtime, it comes down to this. She could be many other things. She could be the kids' football or the kids' music lessons. She could be all kinds of things in the schedule that are, that are good things. She could be my exercise routine. And of course, exercise is good. But if you're exercising when you should be in quiet time with the Lord, then it's the context. So B can be very appealing and very easy to rationalize. And here's the thing, is B isn't in the wrong direction, she's just in another direction. So I want to go this way, but B's over there. So good-looking sin over there, and like where Chad had a hold on me, or potty mouth, it is for the illustration here, that had to be broken. I had to have him let go of me. But now, it's me who doesn't want to let go of me. And it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just a distraction. It's just in another direction. And as long as I'm holding on to be that overtime Sunday morning, that everything with the schedule comes before work or quiet time with the Lord, all these things, it's not that it's so wrong. It's just keeping me from going that way. And the thing is that as long as I'm holding, I can't go that way. I think somebody just got a call from God. Do you hear that?
It's my phone, sorry.
Oh, it's your phone in the back.
It'll stop.
Okay, well, all right. So anyway, as long as I'm holding, I can't go that way. And so until I let go, I can't go. I can't continue. And the worst thing about this is, those are good things. So I might say, you know what, I know I need to go that way, but I'm just going to hold on for a while until I get a little extra money, until the kids' season is over, until whatever. And of course, something else always comes along. And that's where the danger is that pretty soon you can end up forgetting where you were going at all. But let's say that you are committed to this idea that you want to get to the cross. So you finally let go of the good-looking sin over there, and you keep going. And you keep going. Well, an interesting thing that happens is you get further and further down in your obstacles. Yeah, you could trip. Yeah, right. Okay. Adding to the illustration. And it is actually true. Tripping up is probably a good term. Because as more and more things are revealed to you, God starts getting in at the things that are really deep that you don't even see. Since you're so sharp to be in this, Ron, I'm going to let you be in this now. I don't need your foot. I need you, okay? I'm going to ask you to get behind me and just kind of grab me from behind. Nothing too severe now. Well, see, here's these things that are really inherent to you. See, like, if I move around like this, well, I can try. But you can see, but I can't see. And I'm the last person to see this thing that's holding me back. But it's so ingrained. But that even being said, even though he's something I truly don't see, if I try and go towards the cross, you're holding me back. I can't go. I might not even realize why, but I'm getting held back. So at some point, God needs to bring me to the point I can see. And there you are. Man, you are an ugly sin. And that's what Ron might be something really subtle. Like, I just have a problem with compassion. I'm just not that compassionate to people. Everybody else notices this except me. Or maybe my temper tends to go off quickly. And everybody else knows, they just don't want to tell me because I'll get mad. These type of things, they're very subtle, but they're there. They're there. And at some point, if I want to keep going this way, at some point, I have to be made to realize that that's there. And then I have to trust on God to let go. But at some point, I end up, and here I am with no obstacles between me and the cross. And that's our goal. And you say, well, in a perfect world, for one thing, none of us manage to make a straight line. I know that. And sometimes I might have, who knows, the sin that I first let go of might sneak back up and grab me again, and I have an obstacle again I didn't even realize was there. But that is sanctification, is getting through the obstacles to get closer until there is nothing in between you and the cross. And as you get closer, your life transforms. And as your life transforms, there's more peace. And as that happens, there's more joy, there's more victory. There's more power to face what needs to be faced. And here's the problem in our Christianity today. We push so hard for people to get in the door. And that's as far as we tend to go. And so it's just enough to be at the back door. But it's not enough. It's not enough. And if we don't see anything beyond that, we will never experience what we are called to experience. We will never, will remain stunted. We will remain untransformed. We'll remain like we were. The only difference is we're lucky enough to be in one side of the door instead of the other. And we have no transformational stuff going on. And what is there to Christianity? Well, you're saved. Great. And that's it. And that's it. No further. Here's the thing with sanctification. The more we set aside those things, the more we are set aside for God's things. We set aside those things, we get set aside. Here's the other half of that little definition. It was to be set aside for a holy purpose. Set aside for a holy purpose. If we looked in the Old Testament, we'd see that instruments in the temple were set aside. There's a knife. Well, it's a pretty knife, but it's just a knife. No, it is set aside. That knife was used for nothing but the temple sacrifice. Or that spoon was just a spoon. No, that spoon was set aside. It was for nothing else but to pour the incense. That type of thing, set aside. Whether we're talking the Hebrew word for sanctify, which would be cheresh, or agezio, in the Greek, they come down to the same thing. And the great thing about looking up some of these words is they always throw in the secondary meanings, and that's where you get the rich stuff. It really brings the word to life. And in both these languages, because sometimes they'll come up different, but in both these languages they mean to clean, they mean to make holy, they mean to bestow honor upon, they mean to appoint, they mean to dedicate wholly, and that's holy as in completely, to keep, to prepare. Okay, put all that together. To be sanctified by God means, first of all, as soon as you came in the door, you had an appointment. You were appointed in destiny. You were meant to end up here. You were appointed in purpose. There was a reason for, and things you go through that will take you down this aisle towards that cross. Things you do along the way. People you influence along the way. All these things. You have an appointment waiting for you. Now, if you take the appointment given to you by God, appointed by God, you are now have the highest honor in your life. You become honorable in your life. So an honor is set upon you. But to satisfy that honor for that appointment, you need to prepare. It just isn't something that happens. There's preparation. What's the preparation? Getting cleaned up inside. Now, in all the stuff in the physical illustration, Chad held the outside of my arm. I held the outside of me. But you know this, in the real thing, this isn't going on outside. It's going on inside you. So we need to be cleaned up inside. I have to get those things to let go of me inside. And I have to let go of those things inside. It's an inner transformation. As I get cleaned up, I start realizing the value of what's going on here. And it's in fact the most valuable thing in my life. This appointment to the cross is more valuable than anything. Oh, really? You mean it's more valuable than my children or my wife or my family or my mother? Yeah. How so? Because you see, when you get this transformation going on, you will be able to love your wife like you were never able to love her in your own power. Or your husband. Or your children. You, as you become unfettered by all that nasty stuff that was with you, you can actually start loving them selflessly in the way you are called to love them. So yes, it is the most important thing. It is something worth keeping. Keep the appointment. You know, as we make this walk, people, there's so many times people say, I'm tired of fighting with this and I'm just going to quit. Don't quit. Nothing is more important to keep. And God is keeping you in the same way. In every area of your life, it's a whole commitment. You know, I put them to the test there in the first service with all the teachers. Well, you're teaching kids in youth church, you should know this. When Jesus was asked what was the most important commandment of all, the number one, what did he say? You won't care to throw that out? So, right. And thank you, Ron, because it wasn't just loving God. It was loving Him with all your heart, all your mind, all your will. It's a complete package. And we have problems with that as everybody compartmentalizes their life. You have your work life. You have your family life. You've got your friend life. If you belong to a club doing something, you've got your club life. It is, you know, whether it's fishing or this or whatever you may belong to, you get all these things. And you have the breakdown of your day. You've got your morning. You've got your at-work time, your unwind time at the end of the day. You've got all these compartments in your life. And it is, we just naturally kind of keep them apart for the most part. Well, I'm off work. I'm not thinking about work. This is unwind time. And that's a healthy thing in itself. But when it comes to God, there is no compartments. He is every compartment. He is in every compartment, or it will work. Or it doesn't work. I believe in God, but my life's such a mess, and this is wrong. Does God control your love life? Does God control the work life? Does God control your business ethics? Does God control all of it? It's all compartments. Holy. Completely. And that's what sanctification is. It's getting in all of these things. Well, man, that sounds like a pretty lofty goal. Maybe that's kind of like icing on the cake, right? I mean, you're in the door. At least you're in the door. Shouldn't we just, kind of say we've got victory? Well, consider this. Going on in letters from the New Testament. Paul, writing to the church at Corinth. And if there was a superficial church, if there was a church with a whole bunch of flaws and background drama going on, it was a church in Corinth. Those people were a long way from the big saints that we try to characterize. And this is what said, 1 Corinthians 1:2. He's writing to this church in Corinth. To the church of God, which is at Corinth, to those who are sanctified in Christ, called to be saints with all who in every place call on the name of Jesus Christ our Lord, both theirs and ours. And again he says to them in chapter 6, 11, and such were some of you. He's talking about how they were nasty at one time. But you were washed. You were sanctified. You were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of God. Point being, he took for granted that once they came in the door, that they would start this walk towards the cross. It is just not something that is optional. It is a mandate. God says, if you're doing one, you need to be doing the other. That's from Him. That's what God has to say. Not optional. Not optional. And what happens then if we don't? What if we just say, the sanctification thing sounds good, maybe someday we just put it off or don't consider it. What happens if we don't? What if we're like most Christians, if we look at it honestly, where Christianity, if we put in our illustration, is more, how close can I stay to the back door instead of how close can I get to the cross, How close can I, stay on that back door? Can I crack it open? How far can I crack it open and get my foot out? How much of what's behind me can I still hold on to instead of how can I let that go and how close can I get here? What happens if we're a door person instead of a cross person? Said we were dealing from a book by A.B. Simpson, is kind of this, and if we looked at Christian Missionary Alliance, where my theology is coming from, where the affiliation of this church is, this book is in a nutshell. And in his explanation, Simpson's explanation of sanctification, he says this. It fits well with the question. Men and women who do not press on in their Christian experience to gain the fullness of their inheritance. There's a definition for you. Sanctification is you getting the fullness of your inheritance. In him will often become cold and formal. The evil in their own heart will assert itself again and may very likely overcome them, and their work will bring confusion and disaster to the cause of Christ. If they escape the result, it will be as by fire. This is the thing I want you to understand, and maybe the one kind of a little bit of the failing even in this illustration. Right now, as you sit there, you're a fixed distance from the cross. You're sitting there, that's where you are. But we know that in life, anything that's living, you are never in one place. Life is life because it continually changes. No matter what it is, this is no change. You are either moving closer to that cross or you are moving away. You don't end up staying in one fixed position, at least not for any length of time. You are moving in one direction or the other. And that Simpson, he brings this, I think, speaking from experience as a pastor here, is that you watch people and you can tell, because when you're moving away, you try and hold on to what you used to have, and you become formal, and you become cold, and you become stale, and you become something nobody else wants to be. And that's the type of thing that goes on because the old self's reasserting itself. It's a journey one way or the other all the time. We started with a verse. I said this explained it. And I want to read some of that again to you. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, who are the witnesses? The people who took this seriously. Those who made it close to the cross. Those are the people we're talking about. Just like them, let aside every weight and sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Even bringing to the closing of this thing is different from any other sermon. And in this way, you see, usually we'll look through a lot of verses or whatever, and from prayer and everything, believing what God's speaking, a pastor will tell you in conclusion, this is what we can deduce from these verses. But this morning, I'm not even telling you, you don't have to deduce anything. There are the words. There is God speaking direct to you. Set aside every weight of sin. The sins that so easily ensnare. If you don't set them aside, they'll do what these bad gentlemen here tried to do, tripping me coming up the aisle. That's what will happen to you in a very literal sense. Set aside the weights. The whole thing of this morning, the whole thing comes down to this, is to put into your hearts and mind the vision of what is not optional, is that your whole Christian life is about this walk. It is about getting closer. That's really what it's all about. And all the other things happen as you're going in the direction you should be going.